Good afternoon. Thank you, Kelly, for that warm introduction. And I am so delighted to be here, as she said. It is not quite often that I'm able to engage with an audience of engineers. I am most often engaging with teachers and administrators in the humanities and particularly in the K-12 setting. So I am very excited about our workshop. It's very interactive. I'm going to have you doing a lot of things. I will certainly model for you what a classroom teacher does, particularly at the K-12 level. You will probably say, yep, she's a former K-12 teacher. And so I've got my folders for you and some nice handouts. And so we're going to get to work. We're going to get to work around this topic of cultural competence in STEM undergraduate teaching. I want to make sure everybody has a folder. If you don't, we have several extras, so just raise your hand and Dr. Soto will get a folder to you. I prepared 50 folders, so I believe we do have enough. I am a walker and I talk with my hands as well. So I'm going to try to control some of this, stuff like this because I'm on video. But I will walk because it's a good teaching strategy not to stand behind the podium. So I don't typically do that. Let me get right into our agenda for this afternoon because it's jam-packed. And most of you, I think, are teachers, you're instructors in the classroom. And so I'm sure there are times when you don't get through all the material. And so we might not get through all of it. I might have prepared too much for 3 hours, but we're going to get as far as we can. We're going to start out by looking at why focus on cultural competency in STEM in the first place. And then the role of self-reflection in becoming culturally competent. I don't believe we can actually talk about becoming more culturally proficient educators if we're not willing to kind of do that introspective work, right? It's not only about understanding others, but understanding ourselves and how who we are shapes the work we do in classrooms. So we're going to do some self-reflection. And then we're going to look at theories for understanding the harmful effects of bias and discrimination for underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. And we'll round it out by looking at frameworks for inclusive teaching in STEM undergraduate classrooms. And what's going to be really neat about it is I draw on frameworks that we've been using in K-12 education for a long time. So this idea of, inclusive teaching and being culturally relevant isn't new to K-12. It's actually, a little newer for higher ed. And so I'll be mapping some of those K-12 frameworks onto our work today, thinking about undergraduate teaching in your STEM classes. I need you to do a little exercise. I'm getting Buzz Lightyear to help me out here. It's hard to sit for 3 hours. And so I want you to think about distractions that might come up in your mind while we're working together. And so I just want to give you a moment to pause and think about things that might interfere with your work this afternoon. Just give you a minute to think about them. I don't believe you came as a blank slate with nothing on your mind. And then I want you to take one of these index cards and write those things down. Write them down. I'm not collecting them. I don't want to know your business, but write down those things that might present themselves as a distraction. I'll give you a couple moments. And then as a symbol of placing those distractions aside for our time together this afternoon, I want you to put those in the middle of the table, okay? You're saying for these 3 hours, I'm going to put those distractions on hold, and I'm going to try not to focus on them so I can focus on the work at hand. Because the reality is they'll still be there at 5 o'clock, right? So if you can focus for this time, we'll leave those there as a reminder that we've set them aside. All right, so let's go through our objectives and learner outcomes. I have 5 objectives for our time this afternoon. I am hoping that when you leave today, you'll have a better understanding of how your identity shapes your thoughts about teaching and learning, and your interactions with culturally diverse students, culturally diverse learners. I'm also hoping that you'll understand some theoretical and conceptual frameworks that explain underrepresentation and underperformance of certain students in STEM fields. And particularly for our work today, we're talking about underrepresented racial ethnic minorities and women, most specifically, okay? There are certainly other marginalized groups, but most of my discourse will refer to those 2 groups. And then I want you to understand frameworks that really support cultural inclusivity and proficiency. A lot of understanding taking place this afternoon. And then some time for discussing strategies for then practicing inclusion, right? And hopefully we'll get to planning and action. But if we don't, my expectation is when you leave this conference, whenever you're leaving, that you will engage in the planning and action process. Because it does us no good as educators to soak in the theories and concepts and all the information and dialogue with our colleagues and then not do anything to actually change our practice. So those are my objectives and learner outcomes for us. Given that, I think it's important that we understand the larger picture, right? If we're talking about working towards being more culturally competent instructors, what's that pie? What's the bigger picture? Again, for me, it's about who am I as the instructor in those classrooms? Who are my students? And I've kind of separated that piece out because we're thinking a lot about who are those underrepresented students. And then who are we as a classroom, right? As teacher and student. And if you think about that bigger picture, I like to see these as the 3 pieces of the pie. And as educators, we have to constantly be thinking about those 3. Who am I? Who are the students? Who are we together in that learning space? And I forgot to add, I think you have in your packet, there's a hashtag STEM14 that you can use to tweet during our time together this afternoon. The other thing I'll say about that is it's good to use it in case you have questions that come up that we don't get to. I'll be able to go back and look at the Twitter feed and respond to those later. My own Twitter handle is &Dr. Dorinda CA, so you'll be able to find that on Twitter as well. So in your folder, it should be nicely in order. You have an activity that I'd like you to start with, and it's a reflection activity, and it should give you these 3 questions. I want you to take that paper out and write in the blank space your responses to these 3 questions. The first being, I consider my biggest strengths working with culturally diverse students to be, and you finish that. Number 2 is about your challenges. And then the third one is really about you thinking about your own instructional practice and if you personally see it as culturally inclusive or not. Okay, this is a personal reflective exercise. So please, I'll give you a few moments to jot some answers to those. Oh, that's my little timer. Time is up. Wonderful. Okay, now I'd like you to spend a couple moments in a pair and share. It seems like everyone has a partner. In some cases, you might have to do trios, but share at least one of your responses with a partner at your table. Please proceed. All right, if we can pull ourselves back together, that would be great. And let's take them one by one. Let me have a couple people share about what you heard or maybe what you